Today I want to spend some time talking about boundary surveys, and my intent is not to take the place of what you've read in your text, but to add to it. I find that in my own experience, I learn an awful lot when I stare at the work of other surveyors. Where do I find that work most readily? I find evidence of it in the plats of survey that they leave behind. This is a plat that goes back to 1774, and it is in South Carolina. It's rather old script and a little hard to read, but you can see the surveyor's signature here and the date of the survey, 18 October 1774. If I try to make sense of this, this seems to indicate a tract of 2,200 acres along a creek whose name I can't read real well here. Starts with a B. In the description here, it calls out the adjoiners. The description reads as a bounds description. That is, it only identifies the adjoining landowners that abut the property being described. That is, there are enough landowners identified here to enclose the tract. However, if you look on this plat, not only are those owners identified, here you can see someone whose first name is Elias, indicated there, and over here on the east side, somebody Robinson, their land. You can see that listed, but you can also see meets information or measurement information of the boundaries. Some of it is, of course, written upside down by our perspective, but some of it you can read somewhat clearly here. For instance, this line has a bearing of south 35 degrees east, and it appears that it is 480 poles. Now, you may already know that a pole is the same thing as a rod, and a rod is 16.5 feet. Our Gunter's chain of the 18th and 19th century was a 4-pole chain. That is, 4 poles, 4 rods long, 66 feet. You can see several other measurements here, but notice the coarse nature of the directions and the distances, the nearest degree, and the nearest pole. So I think you understand there is some significant potential for misclosure, but they're doing the best they could with what they had. The oldest plat that I have personally had to work with is from the 1830s, which was when you started to see plats showing up here in the former Northwest Territories that we now call Illinois. The interesting thing about boundary survey is that even though we can measure more precisely today, our precision does not override the legal standing of original corners. So if our measurements disagree significantly with the original monuments, and we can prove that those are indeed the original monuments, then it is the monuments on the ground that bear more weight than the measurements on the paper. A friend of mine lives here. This is a fax of that plat. This is not the entire plat, but this is the information that shows you where the boundary is. This particular plat seems to indicate that if you measure from the southwest corner of Section 5 in Township 19 North, Range 8 East, you measure north along the west line. You can see this is the west quarter corner, so this is the west line. Measure along the west line 682.66 feet to a point of beginning that you can see right there. It is a PK nail. Then you can trace around this tract using these directions and distances, and it will return to that point of beginning. Notice there are a few other features shown on this particular plat, specifically a gravel driveway. You also have distances to a barn here, And we have a note that says on this 1.174 acre tract there is a 1.5-story farmhouse and a few sheds, but they're not shown. You can see the location of the township road. And indeed, the section line, the west line of this section, falls out in the road. It doesn't exactly follow the center line. In fact, here it indicates that the center line of the traveled way is 4 feet to the east of the section line. You can also see over here on the east side of the tract there is a rough measurement of 2.4 feet from the east line of the lot over to what appears to be an existing fence. Also, there are some cultivation lines here indicating where the edge of the fields are relative to the lot lines. All that information is designed to make the plat more usable to the owner. If you didn't show any of that information, then the owner would not have many references as to where those particular monuments are. Likewise, it makes life so much easier for any other surveyor that follows in their footsteps trying to retrace these points. This is a plat for a simple meets and bounds description. The description is not shown here, but the evidence from which that description is written is shown clearly on this plat. Now, I want to spend some time walking through a survey that I was involved with back in, I believe, 2006. And I want to use it to illustrate this, what we call waterfall model of the boundary surveying process. And this is one person's view of how surveying works. The first phase, proposal, is the interface with existing and new clients to determine the requirements and to translate client requests into proposals. The land surveyor is often the first contact with the client, and through conversation with the client and perhaps the exchange of some information such as legal description or address or perhaps old survey information the client may have, then the surveyor can initiate some kind of business proposal such as a lump sum contract or an hourly rate contract to do the work requested. And at this point, a simple contract is typically drawn up and signed by both parties. To some extent, in the proposal phase, there is a bit of planning that has to go on and perhaps a little bit of research. Some of that planning and research may be streamlined by the fact that that company may have already done other survey work in the client's vicinity. So thus, the planning and research may simply be digging through company files and reviewing what has been done. If the client is in an area where the company has not done work, then the planning and research process can take longer, and with it there are more unknowns, and thus that will affect the proposal for the client. In this view, down in the bottom part of the screen, you can see in this aerial map the north side of the town of Homer. The square that you see immediately north of that is Section 5, and the tract we were to survey was a 59-acre tract described in the southwest quarter of this particular section. Around this you can see Section 6 on the west, Section 4 on the east, 7 to the southwest, 8 to the south, 9 to the southeast, and then in the township immediately north, from east to west, sections 33, 32, and 31. We did a little research trying to find what we could of previous surveys for this area, and had some limited success. This is a scanned image of the plat made by the original government surveyors in the early 1800s. And this shows Section 5 as 2 regular quarters in the south half. And then, instead of it being 40 chains from the east quarter corner up to the north section corner, there's actually surplus in the north half of this section. Instead of 40 chains, it's 41.76 on the east side of the section, and it's 41.80 on the west side of the section. Per the Government Land Office instructions, then, the surveyors made the south half of each of the northeast and northwest quarters to be regular parts, that is, 80-acre parcels, and then the surplus was accumulated in the north half of the northeast quarter and the north half of the northwest quarter. Also notice that the horizontal distance from the northeast quarter to the north quarter corner is 40 chains, but it's only 39.96 from the north quarter corner to the northeast corner. Because we are on a township line, we have an offset between the north corners of our Section 5 and the south corners of Section 32 immediately to the north. The south corners of Section 32 are what we call standard corners, and the north corners of Section 5 here are considered closing corners. The standard corners existed before the closing corners of Section 5. And because of accumulated errors in surveys, it was permissible to have different corners here. So the numbers you see here indicate what we call the falling. That is, the closing corner of the northwest corner of Section 5 is 1.16 chains to the east of the southwest corner of Section 32. Section 32 is the section immediately north of Section 5. Over here at the northeast corner of Section 5 falls 1.12 chains to the east of the southeast corner of Section 32. Our tract falls down here in the southwest corner of the section, and at the time of the survey you can see there was a wooded line running across the section, and to the north of this wooded line, of course, is what we now call the Salt Fork River. Much of this land has been cleared over the last almost 200 years, and of course farms have been settled in there, and our photo that we saw just a little bit ago seems to indicate that. That wooded line actually would have cut across the section right through here. You can see how that has all but disappeared. This particular tract we're trying to survey is the west 118 rods of the south half of the southwest quarter of Section 5. The southwest quarter would come from the section center down to what appears to be the south quarter corner, over to the southwest corner and up to the west quarter corner. And we are in the west 118 rods. That is, from the west line, we need to come over 118 rods. This is the west 118 rods of the south half of the southwest quarter. Well, the southwest quarter is this area that I'm outlining with my cursor. The south half of that is just as it says. So we're only looking for the west 118 rods. That computes to a roughly 59-acre tract. One of the things we have to do as part of the planning and research in this process, as we defined in our waterfall model, is determine what other surveys have been done there. We did some research, and I don't have a copy of it here, but determined that the surveyor back in, I believe, the 1850s had set 2 stones, or 3 stones. The section corner already existed, and he claimed to have set a stone at the northwest corner, the northeast corner, and the southeast corner of this tract. A fairly thorough search did not reveal any stones. In fact, I think you can understand the likelihood of finding a stone in cultivated land is still intact, is fairly small. And likewise, where roads have been built up and maintained over the years, they do tend to get destroyed. Our task was to reset that from the best evidence we had. We started with the government plat. And then we needed to find other surveys adjoining our section, which may give us clues as to where the lines were. Well, we did some research on the subdivision down here, and we readily found the section corner down here, and what we accepted as the southeast corner of this southwest quarter. We also needed to establish this line and this north-south line here, and then the east-west line, so that we could simply break down this quarter into its component parts. So to do so, we have to establish the 4 lines on all 4 sides of this quarter.